The arena was alive with energy. Every seat was filled, every eye fixed on the ring in the center. The lights were bright, the sound of cheering bouncing off the walls. Some fans stood on their toes to get a better view. Others waved flags or banners, chanting for their favorite fighters. The air smelled of popcorn, sweat, and anticipation. There was a sense that something big was about to happen. No one wanted to miss a second. The main fighter stepped into the arena. Moving with the confidence of someone who believed nothing could touch him, his presence alone commanded attention. He wore a robe that gleamed under the lights, gloves shining as if polished just for this moment. Every step he took toward the ring seemed deliberate, slow, and full of purpose. He smirked not just casually, but with a clear message. He wanted the world to know that he thought he was untouchable. The crowd reacted with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Some people cheered, some laughed, but one thing was certain. Everyone noticed the attitude. Across the ring, the opponent was quietly preparing. He wasn't flashy. He didn't parade around, and he didn't smirk. He focused on his warm-up, moving his hands and feet, stretching, bouncing lightly on his toes. He had trained for months for this moment, and he knew the stakes. Unlike the main fighter, he didn't need to show off. His confidence wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, and deep. Every eye that glanced at him could see the calm determination. Though most of the crowd dismissed it at first, the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, introducing both fighters. The main fighter raised his arms theatrically, basking in the cheers. The opponent simply nodded, acknowledging the crowd politely, but his attention never wavered from the ring. As the fighters faced each other across the ropes, the smirk on the main fighter's face remained. He leaned slightly, bouncing lightly, taunting in a way that seemed to say, "This is going to be easy." The bell rang, and the match began. At first, it seemed exactly as expected. The main fighter moved quickly, his hands and feet coordinated in a display of skill. He landed a few clean jabs, and the audience erupted in approval. He laughed after a successful hit, looking at his opponent as if to say, "Did you see that? I'm unstoppable." The opponent didn't react. He didn't flinch or show fear. He watched carefully, observing every movement, analyzing every angle, waiting for the right moment. Minutes passed, and the main fighter's smirk never faded. He danced around the ring, landing punches here and there, enjoying the show he thought he was giving. Commentators spoke about his previous victories, his strength, his speed, and his apparent dominance. Fans cheered louder, feeling like they were witnessing a guaranteed win. Yet, despite all the showmanship, the quiet presence across the ring began to draw attention. Some people in the crowd noticed the way the opponent moved, how his eyes never wandered, how his focus was unshakable. It was subtle, but it hinted at something the main fighter hadn't expected. Even as the main fighter continued to taunt, the opponent's calm never broke. He ducked under a swinging punch, sidestepped a jab, and countered with a precise strike that barely grazed the main fighter's guard. It was enough to cause a flicker of surprise. The main fighter laughed it off at first, thinking it was just luck, but something had shifted in that instant. The arena felt different. The crowd didn't notice immediately, but a few spectators leaned forward. Sensing a change in the energy between the fighters, the main fighter tried harder to regain control. He moved faster, his punches sharper, his smirk wider. He wanted to show dominance, to remind everyone why he was considered the best. But with each move, the opponent's responses became more confident. He anticipated the punches, dodged with fluidity, and returned strikes with calculated force. The contrast was stark. One fighter relied on arrogance and power, the other on preparation and focus. It was a silent clash of styles. It was just beginning to reveal its drama. Back in the stands, fans were beginning to whisper. "Did you see that?" someone asked. "He's actually keeping up." Others shook their heads, still convinced the main fighter would win easily. But the tension was growing, the kind that made hearts race. The kind that made people lean forward in their seats and hold their breath. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a story unfolding in real time, with an outcome that wasn't as certain as it had seemed. The opponent didn't smile, didn't taunt, and didn't show anger. He moved with purpose, striking when the moment was right, and stepping away when needed. Every gesture had meaning, every motion was part of a larger plan. His eyes were steady, never leaving the main fighter. He wasn't trying to entertain the crowd. He was focused entirely on the match. And that focus was beginning to matter more than anyone in the arena realized. The main fighter started to feel it too. That subtle shift in the rhythm, the way his punches didn't land as easily as before. The quiet confidence of the man across the ring was starting to get under his skin. The smirk began to flicker, just for a moment, but it was there. No one saw it clearly, not yet. But it was the first crack in the armor of arrogance as the round continued. The contrast between the two fighters became impossible to ignore. One relied on showmanship and past victories, the other on discipline and unseen strength. The main fighter's every move was met with a calm, measured response. It was like hitting a wall that was alive, moving just enough to stay one step ahead. The crowd, still cheering loudly, began to feel a different kind of excitement, the thrill of uncertainty. By the end of the round, the main fighter was still standing, but his confidence had taken a hit. He returned to his corner, trying to shake off the growing doubt. His coach leaned close, giving advice, but the smirk was less certain now. The opponent returned to his own corner, breathing steadily, calm as ever, as if he had just completed a simple warm-up rather than survived the first round of a major fight. Back in the stands, the atmosphere had changed. The energy was still electric, but now there was tension, anticipation, and curiosity. The audience could sense that something unexpected was about to happen. They had come expecting a show of dominance, a routine victory. Instead, they were witnessing the first signs of a true challenge, one that could completely turn the story on its head. Outside the ring, cameras captured every detail, the flicker of doubt, the calm determination, the crowd's shifting reactions. Social media buzzed with instant clips, fans discussing the fight, predicting outcomes, and sharing moments that hinted at the drama unfolding. This wasn't just another match. Something deeper was at play, something that wouldn't be clear until the minutes ahead revealed it fully. And so the first part of the fight ended with an arena full of anticipation. A main fighter whose arrogance had started to crack, and an opponent who had quietly shown that he was no ordinary contender. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Every eye was on the ring, every heart beating faster, waiting for the next round, the moment when the unexpected would truly reveal itself. The bell rang for the second round, and the arena erupted again. The crowd's cheers felt louder than ever, almost as if they were trying to push the fighters to give more, to deliver something unforgettable. The main fighter stepped back into the center of the ring, his robe swinging slightly with each movement. The smirk was still there, though it no longer carried the same boldness it had in the first round. There was a flicker of uncertainty hidden behind it, a hint that he could sense something different in his opponent. Across the ring, the underdog adjusted his gloves and bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. He was calm, almost unnervingly so. Every movement was controlled, every breath measured. He didn't wave at the crowd or make any gestures. He simply prepared himself to do what he had trained for all these months. Unlike his opponent, he didn't need to perform for the audience. His performance was for the fight itself. The contrast between the two fighters had become impossible to ignore. One relied on showmanship and bravado, the other on focus and skill. The second round began, and immediately, the main fighter tried to regain control. He came at the underdog with a series of fast jabs, swinging with more force than before. The crowd roared, expecting him to land clean punches that would put the fight clearly in his favor. He laughed between swings, still trying to taunt, hoping that his confidence would intimidate the smaller fighter. But the underdog didn't flinch. He shifted lightly, dodging the punches with fluid movements that seemed effortless. When he countered, his strikes were sharp, precise, and calculated, not wild swings. But exactly what was needed to make the main fighter pause. For the first time, the main fighter's arrogance wavered. A punch he expected to connect glanced off, and the underdog followed with a rapid combination that forced him to step back. The crowd gasped. Some people whispered, Did you see that?" While others shook their heads in disbelief. The commentators who had been praising the main fighter moments before began to acknowledge that this smaller, quieter fighter might actually be a serious challenge. The main fighter's smirk had changed. It was no longer playful. It was tight, forced, a mask trying to cover growing frustration. Every movement of his opponent chipped away at his confidence. He swung harder, tried to intimidate more aggressively, but the underdog's calm remained unshaken. The contrast between the two styles was clear for anyone paying attention. One fighter was loud, reactive, and relying on past victories. The other was silent, methodical, prepared for every possibility. As the round progressed, the underdog began to show more than just defensive skill. He started setting traps, luring the main fighter into positions where he could counter effectively. A jab would be met with a sidestep, followed by a quick strike to the side. A feint from the underdog would make the main fighter overcommit, opening him up to a calculated punch that landed just enough to make him stumble. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, sensing the subtle shift. The match was no longer one-sided. It had become a true contest, a battle of mind and body. The main fighter's frustration grew. Each attempt to dominate was met with resistance. Every punch that didn't land chipped away at his confidence. He began to breathe heavier, his movements slightly less precise. He tried to taunt again, throwing playful jabs and exaggerated gestures. But they lacked the impact they had in the first round. The audience noticed. Some fans began whispering, "He's not as unstoppable as we thought." Others held their breath, sensing that the underdog might turn the fight completely around. Meanwhile, the underdog remained steady. He never raised his voice, never reacted emotionally, and never gave the impression of being afraid. His focus was intense, his eyes locked on the main fighter, reading every movement, predicting every reaction. He moved like a dancer, fluid yet precise, each motion intentional. The crowd couldn't take their eyes off him now. Slowly, admiration replaced doubt. People started to see that his calm wasn't a lack of energy or skill, it was strength. Real strength. In the corner, the main fighter's coach shouted instructions, urging him to go faster, hit harder, to assert dominance. The fighter followed, but his actions had lost some of their natural rhythm. Each punch required more effort than before. Each dodge of the underdog was a reminder that he was not untouchable. The coach's voice was sharp, frustrated, trying to regain control, but the main fighter's mind was racing. For the first time in a long while, he had to rethink his strategy mid-fight. The underdog seized the moment. A well-timed combination of jabs and hooks pushed the main fighter backward. The audience erupted. People on their feet, shouting, cheering, some in disbelief. The main fighter's confidence wavered further as he struggled to adjust. He had underestimated his opponent, assuming that showmanship and past victories would carry him through. Now, reality was sinking in. He was facing someone who had prepared meticulously, who had studied him, and who was ready for every trick he could throw. The underdog didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He simply moved, struck, and defended with a calm precision that only made the main fighter more unsettled. The audience noticed the contrast more with every passing second. One fighter was loud, flashy, and struggling to maintain control. The other was quiet, focused, improving himself through action rather than words. People began to realize that this fight could end in a way they hadn't imagined. The main fighter tried a risky maneuver, swaying aggressively in an attempt to overwhelm his opponent. But the underdog anticipated it, stepping aside smoothly and landing a clean counterpunch. The blow wasn't devastating, but it was enough to make the main fighter stumble and lose balance for a moment. The crowd gasped again. The first signs of real fear appeared in his eyes, subtle but undeniable. For the first time, he wasn't in full control. The round continued with this back and forth, tension building with every punch. The underdog remained composed, using the main fighter's aggression against him. Each misstep by the arrogant fighter became an opportunity for the underdog to strike. People in the audience were on the edge of their seats, whispering and shouting, caught up in the unexpected drama. The arena was no longer just a place for a fight. It had become a stage for a story unfolding in real time, a story that no one could predict. By the end of the second round, the main fighter was breathing heavily, his arrogance fading with each exchange. His smirk had almost disappeared, replaced by tight lips and quick glances at his coach. The underdog returned to his corner, still calm, still focused, barely showing any signs of fatigue. The audience sensed the shift, the energy now clearly favoring the smaller, quieter fighter. People were starting to realize that this match was not going as expected. In the stands, conversations were lively. Some fans had begun to cheer for the underdog, recognizing the skill and determination he displayed. Others still supported the main fighter, hoping he could regain control, but the uncertainty in their voices was clear. Social media buzzed with clips of the fight, moments showing the underdog's precise movements, his calm demeanor, and the main fighter's growing frustration. Clips went viral, debates started, and hashtags began trending. The fight had captured attention beyond the arena. The main fighter's corner tried to motivate him, giving quick instructions, reminding him of his previous victories, trying to spark confidence. He nodded, but his movements were slightly off, his timing slower than before. The underdog, meanwhile, didn't need encouragement. His preparation and focus carried him, his strategy unfolding naturally. Every spectator in the arena could feel the tension building for the next round. It was clear that the match was entering a critical phase, and no one could predict who would come out on top. As the bell signaled the end of the round, both fighters returned to their corners. The main fighter's energy was lower, his usual swagger diminished. The underdog's calm confidence, however, remained intact. It was clear to anyone watching that the fight was far from over, but the dynamics had changed completely. What had begun as an expected victory for the main fighter had transformed into a test of skill, patience, and strategy. The audience could feel at the moment when everything might shift completely was coming closer, and no one wanted to miss a second of it. The arena settled for a moment, the tension almost tangible. People whispered, eyes fixed on the ring, sensing that the real story of the fight was only beginning. The crowd's energy was a mix of excitement and anxiety, as if everyone knew something remarkable was about to happen. The second round had ended, but it had set the stage for the real challenge, for the moments where the main fighter's arrogance would truly be tested. Against the quiet determination of the underdog, the third round began, and the arena seemed to hold its breath. The lights shone brightly over the ring, casting long shadows that danced with every movement of the fighters. The crowd's roar was loud, but it had a new quality now. There was anticipation, a tension that hummed through the air, because everyone had started to realize this was no ordinary fight. The main fighter entered the ring with a forced smile, trying to convince the audience, and maybe himself, that he was still in full control. His robe swayed with his steps, but it felt heavier somehow, like the weight of expectation and growing doubt pressed against him across the ring. The underdog moved with the same calm precision as before. He stretched briefly, shook out his arms, and adjusted his gloves. His focus was total, his eyes locked on the main fighter. There was no arrogance, no need to prove anything to the crowd, only the quiet certainty of preparation and skill. The audience noticed this contrast more than ever. One fighter seemed rattled, trying to perform for the crowd, while the other appeared completely in command, moving with a natural grace that made it clear he belonged there just as much as anyone. The bell rang, and the round began. The main fighter immediately came forward with a flurry of punches, trying to regain dominance. He moved faster than ever, his gloves swinging with intent, his footwork sharp. But the underdog was ready. He stepped aside, pivoted, and returned blows that were precise rather than powerful. Strikes designed to test timing, endurance, and focus. Each counter reminded the main fighter that this was no longer a simple match. Every movement he made was being anticipated, every reaction calculated. The audience could feel the tension tighten with each exchange. The main fighter's frustration was growing. His usual tactics were failing, and every punch he threw seemed to be met with a calm, effective response. He tried to taunt again, to mock his opponent, but the smirk that had once come so naturally now felt forced. There were moments when his confidence slipped through the cracks, revealing a hint of panic. He was used to being the center of attention, the one who dominated the ring. But now he was being challenged in a way that shook him. The underdog didn't taunt, didn't react to the showmanship. He simply moved, defended, and struck when the opportunity arose. Each movement was efficient, purposeful, and measured. The crowd started to notice the elegance in his technique. It wasn't flashy or loud, but it was undeniably effective. People whispered among themselves, "He's good, really good." The main fighter's arrogance was slowly being replaced by caution. A subtle change that was easy to miss unless you were watching closely. A critical moment arrived about halfway through the round. The main fighter lunged with a big right hook, aiming to land a knockout punch. The underdog anticipated it perfectly. With a small shift of his weight, he dodged the punch and landed a sharp counter to the side of the main fighter's ribs. The force wasn't enough to knock him down, but it made him stumble, just enough to disrupt his rhythm. The crowd erupted, shouting and cheering, some on their feet. Cameras caught the moment in slow motion, replaying the precision of the dodge and the elegance of the counterpunch. It was a clear sign that the underdog wasn't just surviving, he was taking control. The main fighter stepped back, breathing harder than before. His movements were no longer as confident or as fluid. He swung wildly, trying to regain control, but his punches lacked accuracy. Every overreach became an opportunity for the underdog to respond, and the audience could see it happening. They had come expecting a quick, dominant performance from the main fighter. But instead, they were witnessing a battle of skill, strategy, and willpower. The underdog's calm focus seemed to grow with every punch, every counter, every precise step. The tension in the arena was palpable. Spectators leaned forward, some gripping the railings, others holding their breath. The commentators, who had been predicting a routine victory for the main fighter, were now speaking in awe about the underdog's technique and intelligence. They highlighted the way he moved, how he read his opponent's body language, and how he turned the main fighter's aggression against him. It was a lesson in preparation, patience, and discipline, and the audience was captivated. The main fighter tried to land a powerful uppercut, hoping to regain control, but the underdog had anticipated it again. With a small step to the side, he avoided the punch and countered with a hook that caught the main fighter off guard. The blow wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to stagger him slightly. For the first time in the fight, the main fighter's expression changed completely. There was no smirk, no arrogance, only surprise, and the first real signs of fear. The audience gasped, sensing the shift. This was not the fighter they had come to see dominate. This was a fight that could end in a way nobody expected. The underdog continued his measured approach. Never rushing, never showing frustration, never celebrating. He moved with precision, using the main fighter's aggression as a tool rather than a threat. Every dodge, every step, every punch was part of a strategy that had been carefully planned and executed through months of training. The crowd could see it unfolding, and it was mesmerizing. People who had come to cheer for the main fighter were now silently rooting for the underdog. Drawn to his skill and composure, as the round continued, the main fighter grew more desperate. His punches became more erratic, his movements less coordinated. The underdog, sensing the shift, increased his pressure, slightly, not recklessly, but strategically. He began to force the main fighter into corners, limit his movement, and exploit gaps in his defense. Every audience member could feel the tension, the uncertainty, the excitement. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a story of skill, pride, and determination unfolding in front of their eyes. Midway through the round, the underdog landed another precise combination. A jab, followed by a quick hook that shook the main fighter again. The crowd erupted into applause, some cheering, some in disbelief. The main fighter's corner shouted instructions, urging him to regain composure, to focus on his strength, to stop letting the underdog control the pace. But the fighter was flustered. His usual confidence, his habitual dominance, had been challenged, and he struggled to adapt. The underdog didn't press recklessly. He maintained control, conserving energy while maximizing impact. Each strike was calculated to wear down the main fighter, both physically and mentally. He was proving a point, not just winning a fight. The audience felt the significance. This was a match that would be remembered not for the anticipated dominance of the main fighter, but for the unexpected skill and determination of someone. Underestimated, the main fighter tried to land a risky spinning punch, hoping to catch the underdog off guard. But the underdog read it perfectly, sidestepped, and delivered a clean strike that landed with enough force to stagger him. The crowd gasped again, some standing, some cheering wildly. The main fighter's confidence had clearly taken a hit. His corner shouted frantically, trying to motivate him, but the fighter's movements were tense and uncoordinated. The smirk that had been so natural in the first round was gone completely. By the end of the round, the main fighter was breathing heavily, his pride bruised more than his body. The underdog returned to his corner, calm as ever, eyes steady, breathing controlled. There was no celebration, no overconfidence, just quiet confidence and focus. The audience sensed the moment. The fight had reached a critical turning point. The main fighter's arrogance had been chipped away, replaced by caution and doubt. The underdog had proven that preparation, skill, determination could challenge even the most confident and dominant fighter. Spectators were buzzing with excitement. Conversations erupted in whispers and shouts. People replayed moments in their minds, discussing the underdog's precision, his strategy, and his ability to stay calm under pressure. The energy in the arena was electric, charged with anticipation for what the next round would bring. Cameras flashed, social media feeds exploded with clips, and the commentators highlighted the fight as one of the most compelling battles they had ever witnessed. The main fighter's corner tried to regroup him, shouting encouragement, reminding him of his past victories, and urging him to find his rhythm again. But the fighter's frustration was clear. His body language was tense, his movements less confident. He had underestimated the underdog, and it was costing him. The underdog, however, didn't need guidance. His strategy was unfolding naturally. Every step, every punch, every dodge was part of a carefully planned approach that was now paying off spectacularly. As the bell signaled the end of the third round, the arena erupted one final time for the fighters. The main fighter returned to his corner, sweat dripping down his face, his confidence shaken. The underdog returned calmly, adjusting gloves and breathing evenly, as if he had just completed another routine training session rather than dominated a round in a major fight. The energy in the arena was a mix of amazement, anticipation, and tension. Everyone knew that the next round could define the outcome. The stage was set for the next chapter of the fight. The main fighter had been humbled, his arrogance chipped away by precision, focus, and determination. The underdog had quietly taken control, showing skill and intelligence that had gone unnoticed by most until now. The audience waited with bated breath, sensing that the story of this fight was far from over, and that the moments to come could be unforgettable. The fourth round started with a quiet tension that spread through the arena like electricity. The crowd's cheers were still loud, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation, almost a hush in some corners. Yes, everyone realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The main fighter stepped back into the ring, his robe swinging as usual, but this time it seemed heavier, almost cumbersome. His shoulders were not as relaxed, his movements slightly stiff. There was no room for the playful smirk he had worn so freely in earlier rounds. That arrogance, which had once defined him, had been chipped away, bit by bit, replaced with caution, frustration, and uncertainty. Across the ring, the underdog moved with quiet grace. He shifted his weight, bouncing lightly, gloves up, eyes locked on the main fighter. His breathing was controlled, his movements precise. There was no showmanship, no performance for the crowd. Every motion had purpose, every step intentional. He had studied his opponent for months, anticipating his style, predicting his reactions, and now it was all coming together. The contrast between the two fighters was striking. One was loud, reactive, and now flustered. The other was calm, deliberate, and in command of his own energy. The bell rang, and the fourth round began. The main fighter came forward aggressively, throwing a flurry of punches. He moved faster than he had before, desperate to reclaim the upper hand. But the underdog was ready. With small, fluid movements, he slipped and countered, his strikes measured but precise. Each punch landed just enough to make the main fighter hesitate. Each dodge reminded him that his previous confidence was no longer enough. The crowd noticed the subtle shifts. Gasps, cheers, and murmurs filled the air as the tension mounted. The main fighter tried to taunt again, moving theatrically, gesturing at the underdog, laughing as if mocking him. But it was clear that the laughter was forced, brittle. The underdog didn't respond. He didn't raise his voice or make any gestures. He simply maintained his stance, his focus unwavering. Every audience member could feel the difference. One fighter was losing his grip on control, while the other seemed to grow stronger, steadier, and more dangerous with every passing second. Minutes passed, and the underdog began to take subtle control of the round. He didn't rush or swing wildly. Instead, he measured his attacks, forcing the main fighter into defensive positions and exploiting small openings. A jab here, a hook there, a shift of weight, and suddenly the main fighter was off balance, reacting rather than acting. The crowd could sense the tide turning. What had been expected to be an easy victory was now a battle, a clash of skill, patience, and heart. At one point, the main fighter attempted a risky uppercut, aiming to land a decisive blow and reclaim his dominance. But the underdog anticipated it perfectly. He ducked slightly, pivoted, and landed a sharp counter to the side, causing the main fighter to stumble backward. The crowd erupted. Cameras captured the moment, replaying it over and over. Every spectator felt the drama, the suspense, and the thrill of witnessing a fighter, who had been underestimated, prove his strength and skill. The main fighter's frustration grew visibly. He swung harder, faster, but his movements lacked the fluidity of earlier rounds. Each misstep was met with a precise, calculated response from the underdog. The crowd could see it happening. The once confident fighter was being worn down not by brute force, but by skill, intelligence, and calm determination. His corner shouted instructions, urging him to fight smarter, to adjust, to find his rhythm. But his usual confidence was gone, replaced by doubt and fatigue. The underdog sensed the moment. He increased pressure slightly, forcing the main fighter into the ropes and limiting his movement. Each strike, each movement, each dodge was purposeful, designed to exploit weaknesses and maintain control without overexertion. The crowd could feel the shift in energy. The arena was no longer just cheering for a fight. They were watching a battle of strategy and willpower unfold in real time. About halfway through the round, the underdog landed a combination that made the main fighter stumble visibly. It wasn't a knockout, but it was enough to break the rhythm completely. The crowd erupted again, some jumping to their feet, others holding their breath in disbelief. Social media feeds lit up with clips of the underdog's movements, his precision, his calmness under pressure. Fans were now captivated by his skill, discussing how he had turned the fight around and challenged a fighter who had seemed untouchable. The main fighter's frustration was now mingled with disbelief. He had underestimated his opponent, assuming that a display of arrogance in past victories would secure an easy win. But the underdog had prepared meticulously, anticipated every move, and exploited every opportunity. The once smiling fighter was now forced into defensive maneuvers, reacting to attacks rather than creating them. His corner tried to motivate him, but he was no longer in full control. The underdog remained calm, moving with precision, his strategy unfolding perfectly. Every dodge, every strike, every pivot reinforced his dominance in the round. The audience was drawn to his composure, his intelligence, and his ability to remain focused under pressure. People who had come expecting a simple, dominant performance were now on the edge of their seats, witnessing a true contest of skill and determination as the round progressed. The main fighter's energy began to drain. His movements were slower, his punches less accurate, his footwork less fluid. He tried to force the fight with aggressive swings, but the underdog was always one step ahead, reading every motion, anticipating every attack, and responding with calm precision. The contrast between the two fighters could not have been clearer. One relied on arrogance and raw energy, now waning. The other relied on focus, preparation, and patience, growing stronger with each passing second. A critical moment came near the end of the round. The main fighter lunged with a desperate punch, aiming for a knockout. The underdog anticipated it, shifted smoothly, and delivered a combination of strikes that made the main fighter stagger backward, nearly losing balance. The crowd erupted again, the energy in the arena reaching a fever pitch. Cameras captured every movement, replaying the underdog's precision and the main fighter's faltering composure. Social media exploded with clips, fans analyzing every moment. Debating what might happen in the final round, the main fighter's corner shouted desperately, trying to motivate him, urging him to fight with everything he had left. He nodded, but the hesitation was clear. His confidence had been shaken, his arrogance replaced by concern, his smirk all but gone. The underdog returned to his corner, calm and composed, barely showing any signs of fatigue. The crowd sensed the shift. The momentum had clearly moved to the quieter, more disciplined fighter. Spectators whispered, shouted, and gasped as the tension mounted. People who had initially cheered for the main fighter now found themselves rooting for the underdog, captivated by his skill, patience, and composure. The arena was no longer just a place for a fight. It had become a theater of strategy, courage, and determination. Every observer could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that the next round could decide everything. As the bell signaled the end of the round, the main fighter returned to his corner. Breathing heavily, his pride battered more than his body, the underdog returned calmly, adjusting his gloves, eyes steady and breathing controlled. The audience sensed that the fight was now completely different. The arrogance that had dominated the first rounds had been replaced by a quiet respect for skill and preparation. The stage was set for the final moments. The main fighter had been humbled, his confidence shaken, and his energy waning. The underdog had proven his strength, skill, and determination, quietly taking control of the match. The crowd waited with bated breath, knowing that the next round could be the most dramatic and unforgettable of all. Every eye in the arena was fixed on the fighters, every heartbeat in sync with the rising tension. The story of the fight was approaching its climax. No one wanted to miss a single moment. The fifth round began with an intensity that could almost be felt in the bones of everyone in the arena. The crowd was louder than ever, their cheers mingling with gasps, whispers, and exclamations of excitement. This was not just another boxing match. This was the final chapter of a story that had already surprised, shocked, and thrilled every spectator. The main fighter stepped into the ring, trying to summon his confidence. But it was clear to anyone watching that something had changed. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone. Every step seemed measured, cautious, even hesitant. He raised his gloves, tried to bounce on his toes, and attempted a smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't the same smirk that had intimidated the crowd in the first round. Across the ring, the underdog moved with the calm, deliberate precision that had carried him through the fight. He bounced lightly, gloves up, eyes focused. There was no rush, no emotion on his face, only the quiet determination of someone who had prepared for this moment for months. He wasn't here to prove himself to the crowd or to show off. Every movement, every breath, every punch was part of a strategy, and the crowd could feel it. There was a sense that something monumental was about to happen. The bell rang, and the fifth round started. Immediately, the main fighter came forward aggressively, throwing punches with everything he had left. The crowd roared in anticipation, expecting him to reclaim control in a dramatic final effort. But the underdog was ready. He moved smoothly, sidestepping and dodging with precision, his own punches landing at exactly the right moment. Each strike was calculated, measured, and impactful enough to keep the main fighter off balance. The main fighter swung wildly, desperation creeping into every movement. His usual tactics were failing completely. The underdog anticipated every overreach, using his opponent's aggression against him. A punch aimed to overpower became an opening for a counterattack. A feint meant to confuse became another chance to exploit a weak spot. The crowd gasped at each exchange, sensing the shift in momentum. The arena was no longer filled with certainty about who would win. It was filled with suspense, excitement, and awe. At one point, the main fighter attempted a risky spinning back fist, a move designed to surprise and intimidate. But the underdog had already predicted it. He stepped aside, ducked, and landed a precise combination that staggered the main fighter. The crowd erupted. Cameras caught the moment from multiple angles, showing the main fighter struggling to regain his balance, sweat flying, his face showing the first real signs of fear and disbelief. The underdog remained calm, breathing steadily, eyes locked on his opponent. Ready for the next move? The main fighter's frustration was growing visibly. He had been confident, arrogant, and sure of victory. Now, every move he made was met with resistance, countered by someone who had thought 3 steps ahead. His energy was fading. His punches were less coordinated, his footwork slower, his reflexes slightly delayed. The underdog, by contrast, remained composed, calm, and relentless in his focus. Every observer could see it, the fighter who had been underestimated was now in control. As the round progressed, the underdog began to dominate the pace of the fight. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Every dodge, every jab, every hook was perfectly timed. The main fighter swung harder, trying to reclaim dominance, but each attempt only highlighted his fatigue and frustration. The audience was on edge, leaning forward, shouting and gasping with every strike. This was no longer a fight of brute strength. It was a battle of mind, body, and heart, near the midpoint of the round. The main fighter launched an aggressive combination, hoping to land a decisive blow. The underdog anticipated it, pivoted, and countered with a swift, precise strike that caught the main fighter off guard. He stumbled, trying to regain footing, but the underdog pressed the advantage with a calm series of jabs and hooks. The crowd erupted again, some on their feet, others holding their breath, watching in awe. The main fighter's coach shouted instructions, but his words couldn't mask the growing panic in his fighters' movements. The tension in the arena reached a peak. Every punch, every movement, every glance between the fighters told a story of determination, preparation, and resilience. The underdog was proving that skill, focus, and mental strength could overcome arrogance, experience, and brute force. Each moment was more gripping than the last. Spectators whispered, "He's incredible," or "I didn't expect this," while others shouted encouragement. The energy in the arena was electric, as if everyone could feel that something extraordinary was unfolding. The main fighter, realizing that his usual tactics were failing, tried one final gamble. He swung wildly, aiming for a knockout that would turn the match around in a single moment. But the underdog had anticipated it. With a small sidestep and a quick pivot, he avoided the punch and delivered a combination of strikes that landed cleanly and effectively. The main fighter stumbled, nearly falling, his gloves dropping slightly as exhaustion set in. The crowd erupted into a mixture of cheers, gasps, and applause. Cameras captured the moment from every angle, showing the contrast between the underdog's calm precision and the main fighter's stunned disbelief. For the first time, the main fighter's expression changed completely. There was no smirk, no arrogance, no bravado, only shock, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he was about to be defeated. The underdog, still calm and composed, pressed forward strategically. Every move was intentional, each strike calculated. He didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He simply focused on finishing what he had started. The crowd was on the edge of their seats. Some fans who had initially cheered for the main fighter now found themselves rooting for the underdog. There was a collective awareness that they were witnessing not just a fight, but a story of skill, courage, and perseverance. Social media feeds exploded with clips and commentary. Fans praising the underdog's strategy, composure, and determination. The arena had become a theater of suspense, every second drawing the audience deeper into the story unfolding before them as the round neared its final moments. The main fighter made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He lunged with a risky punch, throwing everything into it. The underdog, calm as ever, stepped aside smoothly, avoided the punch, and countered with a clean, precise combination that sent the main fighter staggering. For a moment, the arena fell silent, the suspense almost unbearable. The main fighter was speechless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. His gloves were up, but his stance was faltering. His confidence, which had seemed unshakable at the start of the fight, was gone. The final seconds ticked down, each movement magnified by the anticipation of the crowd. The underdog continued to press carefully, using the main fighter's own aggression and exhaustion against him. Each punch, each step, each movement was deliberate and controlled. The crowd could see it, could feel it, could sense the moment that would define the fight. Cameras flashed, commentators shouted in excitement, and the spectators held their breath collectively. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the round, the arena erupted into applause, cheers, and shouts. The main fighter's gloves dropped slightly as he returned to his corner, exhausted, humbled, and speechless. The underdog returned calmly, adjusting gloves, breathing evenly, and standing tall. There was no arrogance in his posture, only quiet confidence and satisfaction. He had done what many thought impossible. He had turned the tide, challenged a dominant fighter, and shown skill, preparation, and mental strength could overcome arrogance and expectation. The announcer stepped forward, and the result was declared. The crowd erupted even louder, some standing, others cheering wildly. The underdog had won. Cameras captured the moment, showing the contrast between the humbled, stunned main fighter and the calm, composed victor. Fans continued to cheer, some crying, some shouting, all swept up in the energy of the arena. The underdog raised his gloves in acknowledgement, not arrogance, not mockery, but respect for the sport and the challenge he had faced. Interviews after the fight revealed the underdog's mindset. He spoke calmly about preparation, focus, and the importance of discipline. He praised his opponent's skill and expressed respect, never boasting or showing arrogance. Fans admired him not only for the victory, but for the humility, strategy, and heart he displayed. The main fighter reflected on the match, admitting his underestimation and acknowledging the lesson learned. His confidence would return, but it would be tempered by respect and experience, a humility earned in the ring. The story of the fight spread beyond the arena. Clips went viral online. Fans debated every punch and strategy, and commentators highlighted the underdog's mental strength, preparation, and ability to remain calm under pressure. People who had expected an easy victory for the main fighter were reminded of the timeless lesson. Arrogance can be humbled. Skill and preparation can triumph, and quiet determination can overcome even the loudest confidence. The arena slowly emptied, but the energy lingered in the air. The underdog had not just won a fight. He had created a story of perseverance, focus, and respect. The main fighter had been humbled, forced to recognize the skill of his opponent. The audience left buzzing, sharing the experience, reflecting on what they had witnessed. The underdog's victory was a lesson in patience, preparation, and heart, a story that would be remembered long after the fight ended. And so the fight ended. What began as an expected easy victory turned into a story of surprise, strategy, and quiet strength. The underdog.com, focused and prepared, had turned the tables completely. The main fighter, arrogant and confident at the start, left speechless, had learned a lesson in humility and respect. The crowd, once expecting a simple show of dominance, had witnessed something far greater, a story of determination, intelligence, and heart that would be remembered forever.